Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love it.
the writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing is
so some readers love that, and some readers are like, "But I wanted more of this." So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by not one but two authors, the New York Times best-selling husband and wife writing team, Collette Lyons and Paul Vlitos, a.k.a. Ellery Lloyd. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks so much for coming on. It's not often I get to do a 2-for-1 writing team, so let's jump right in. Talk about the latest novel, which just came out, The Final Act of Juliette Willoughby. Which one of you has the better sales pitch?
Oh. We tend to just talk over each other. So,
right, you go first.
It is a mystery set over the course of a century, 3 mysterious disappearances and deaths linked by one painting which holds secrets. So Juliette Willoughby is an artist, an heiress who runs away in 1938 to join her older married artist lover Oscar and becomes part of the
in Paris.
Surrealist circle in Paris.
Oh, you were going to say that anyway.
Yes. Yeah. After she paints her masterpiece self-portrait as Sphinx, which is exhibited for one night before she pulls it from the exhibition, and shortly afterwards she and Oscar die alongside that painting in a mysterious studio fire.
Then we cut forward to the second timeline, which is 1990s. Cambridge, 2 young history of art students. They're doing their dissertations and they stumble across a series of clues that seem to suggest the painting may have survived, but also the fire may have been not an accident.
And then you fast forward to present day Dubai, where the painting, which has been rediscovered, has just been sold for 42 million by Patrick, one of the students, who is now an art dealer. And almost immediately he is arrested for murdering the last surviving member of the Willoughby clan, his closest friend, Harry Willoughby. And then we unpick how this is all linked, and how the secrets may lie in this painting.
Right. So multiple timelines, lots going on, and sort of secrets carrying on through generations and things like that, figuring it all out.
Exactly. It's been called a puzzle box of a novel.
Well, that's a really great way to describe a novel. To me, that immediately is very appealing, and it doesn't put it just within a sort of very congested genre of being like, oh, it's another one of those, calling it a sort of puzzle box. That's a great little tagline. I like that. It's always interesting to learn with authors about the inception of a novel, what was the first part, the first idea, and I'm even more interested, because there's 2 of you involved here. How did the kind of this begin? What was the inception point?
Well, it always starts for us with a world, doesn't it? So we did like kind of parenting influences in the first novel. We did like a private members club. In our second novel, The Club.
And we were really interested in exploring the art world in this. I did a history of art degree. It's not something that I ended up working in, but, the surrealists especially, and the female surrealists are, a group that I've been very interested in. And also, I just really, really love mystery novels centred around art.
Yes, you love mystery novels, and you also love that kind of, what's that Sunday afternoon antique hunt kind of thing?
The Antiques Roadshow.
You're really interested in kind of auctions and stuff. So brought that world of mystery, lots of different worlds together, actually, wasn't it?
It's nice that you, a lot of people have degrees that they're never able to use. It's nice that you did find a way to use your degree at this point.
Finally.
And in terms of the process, when it comes to like co-writing, do the two of you sort of sit down and kind of brainstorm and then plan everything out before you start writing?
Yes. So with our first novel, which is called People Like Her, we had a kernel of an idea and sat down to write pretty quickly, actually. But it was very, very voice led, that novel. So and we tripped up halfway through because we hadn't really plotted further than the middle of the novel. But with something like The Final Act of Juliette Willoughby, there's no way that it could have been written without a really a detailed roadmap.
We had a wall of sticky notes in different colours for the different timelines, because you're sort of also arranging it like there's lots of mysteries, but you don't want it to be confusing, and you want everything to kind of tie up and the timelines to kind of work together. So there was a lot of moving around of sticky notes and stuff.
And we had, this novel went through, I mean, as all novels do, a few drafts, but we tried different ways of plaiting the timelines together, because, as Paul says, although it's a complex plot, we never wanted the reader to be confused about what they needed to be focusing on at any given point. So the structure we landed on hopefully is not confusing.
But at least but intriguing. That's the goal, right? Not confusing, but intriguing, and asking questions. Yeah. How do you divide kind of the writing into different parts to sort of say, I'll write this, you write that?
Usually first draft, we take a kind of voice or a character each. So the fact that there's two of us, we've tried to make a kind of, like a strength, like, oh, these do feel like two different characters.
There's, in the club, there were, I think, 4 or 5 different characters, but we, which was our last novel. Can't remember them all.
Too many.
So we will, in the first draft, take a character or 2 characters each, and maybe in a successive draft. And then after that, we both edit everything. So I don't think in any of our novels there's a single sentence that we haven't both had a hand in.
You just won't leave my lovely sentences alone. Always pruning them.
Killing your darlings with wanton abandon.
Pruning. Secateurs.
Okay, but so but generally the sort of foundations, the bones of different point of view characters, those are kind of tied to one or the other of you?
Yes, exactly.
And I guess something to sort of slightly differentiate is we tend to decide quite early on what the structure is going to be in terms of, right, there's going to be 3 voices, this is how it's going to organise. And then within that, we're still working out the plot and sort of... what happens within the world. We've got to be pretty sure early on what the structure is going to be, and that's how we divide up the initial labour.
Yeah.
Right. And then you kind of bring it all together, and like you said, you'll look over each other's writing and then kind of line it all up and kind of complete the puzzle of the kind of complete structure, I imagine.
Yes, exactly. And that's not to say, we start off with a very detailed roadmap, but we do take detours. So, and there is, in successive drafts, there are always fairly major changes made, but it's always easier once we have a first draft done to sit down and decide what those tweaks should be together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the same as... I guess you guys are almost doing the beginning stages of what an editor would do, because there's the 2 of you.
Yes, and actually it's meant generally, and I don't want to jinx us, but we've never had major structural edits from editors. So I'm sure your listeners know this already, but... usually writers will submit a fairly early draft to an agent. If they've got a good relationship with their agent, the agent will give them feedback. Then one or two rounds of that perhaps, and then it will go to their editor, and then the editor will also have one or two rounds of feedback. And the first round usually is something called structural edits, which is lose this character, or actually this starts from the wrong place, or have you thought about changing this plot point because of X reason?
Yeah, it's the big one.
The big one, the one that always makes your heart sink. But actually, because Paul and I have each other, we kind of have found that we've tended to do the structural edits ourselves before it gets to anybody else's eyes, and that, that's a fairly sort of laborious process, but it means that by the time that we're handing our books over to anybody else at all, we're fairly confident that it makes sense, because we've given each other fairly brutal feedback on what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, and obviously you two are have a very close relationship, and I imagine that there's not much holding back when it comes to this isn't working.
Yes. Exactly.
Yes. I mean, because I sort of teach a bit of creative writing as well, but you would never be as rude to a student as you would be someone else. Because I think the other thing, I think all writers need to do it, it's quite a hard thing to do, is do like an impatient reading of a draft, where you're just like, oh my God, I'm
get on with it.
Yeah, get on with it. This is boring. You've told us this already, which, I will quite happily write on the stuff that Collette and I have written, but you wouldn't necessarily write on anyone else's.
Yeah, and my background is I was a magazine journalist editor, section editor for years, and you have to get sort of into fairly deep edits on features quite frequently, and so we are both, because we're both used to giving feedback, I think we're fairly relaxed about accepting it as well.
Yeah, and I've had a number of journalists turned kind of author on the podcast, and one thing that I'll always hear from journalists is how it kind of coming into publishing from this direction is they're always surprised at how nice the feedback and critique is, and like how pleasant it is.
There's I won't tell you who, but there was someone who is famous for other reasons, but has since segued into novels, who I gave some edits to for a feature once, and it's fairly typical as an editor to give your edits in square brackets in capitals, which is obviously quite shouty. But most journalists know that that's just the form of your, and you. So, but I got quite an angry response.
What sort of sad
and angry response to my edits.
Why are you shouting at me?
And I did think, and it was about a page and a half of vitriol from him. So I do sometimes think, I wonder how his poor editor fares when he gets his structural edits back. But anyway,
yeah, I've spoken to a number of editors on the podcast as well, and what I've learned is that there is beyond the actual sort of logistics of editing and working with an author, there is a whole element of being an editor, which is a sort of social element of understanding how much give and take each author can handle on a sort of unique personal level. It's
a really interesting point. And presumably they modulate their method and tone. Whereas we've already gone through with a red pen with each other, so it's all good.
Yeah. And I think most journalists who move into publishing novels, probably the editors will know that they're going to have a thick skin towards critique and feedback, and know that how this process works.
Exactly.
Getting back quickly onto your process, the two of you writing together, you mentioned that your first book was relatively unplanned. This new one, The Final Act of Juliette, would be very planned out. You said because you felt like this novel needed to be planned out. Is that because of the necessity of this novel specifically, or is that a mark of like how much your process has evolved since the first one?
The novels have become more ambitious, mm-hmm. More research heavy. And we have, we are currently writing our fourth novel, and the process has been very similar to the final act of Juliette Willoughby. So this one involves time travel. So
time travel murder mystery.
Yes.
So we thought we were going to go back, and you go back to basics and go really simple, but instead
we'll write an easy novel next time, and we have not done that. And so no, I think this is, to be honest, it's more a refining of our process rather than anything else. Whenever you write your first novel, and Paul's written 2 novels before, and I hadn't ever written a novel, I think you go into it with sort of wild hope, don't you? That it will turn into something, if not publishable, then at least readable.
Well, there's just that. I'm writing a novel. I'm actually doing it. It's like you've learned to ride a bike.
Look, it's getting longer. It's got chapters, and so we wouldn't have known how to structure or sort of work together at that point. We just sat down and started writing, and over the course of, I guess, 6 years. It's basically since our daughter was born, and she's nearly 7 now. But I think that it's just become clearer. With the first novel, which is called People Like Her, we did just sit down and start writing. And then I stopped. I basically stopped 2/3 of the way through because
and I kept going.
And Paul kept going like Roadrunner off a cliff. And it just missed. It didn't have one of the voices for the last third of the novel because I knew that the plot didn't work, and I couldn't find a way to write into the void. And Paul is brilliant at just sitting down and ensuring that words make it onto the page, and you will always be able to use some of the thoughts you've had, or some of the sentences that you've written in chapters and chunks that don't actually make it into the final novel as written. But at that point, we did just realise that we needed to sit down and properly plot, because we're thriller writers, so you need the plot to work.
Yeah,
I guess we're also quite complementary kinds of writers in that Collette is much better at saying, "Oh, hold on, it's like asking for directions. It might just be gendered. I will doggedly keep going."
And we'll end up in Scotland when actually we wanted to go to Harrogate.
Collette will say, "No, hold on, this has got lost. Let's stop. Let's rethink."
Let's ask some directions. We've become more adept at it over time, I think.
Yeah, and sort of, I mean, it's. I'll have to talk about Paul a bit. And you, like you said, you have been teaching creative writing, and you've published 2 novels prior to this. But I imagine it was a whole, despite that kind of, you must have like a pretty vast knowledge of the craft and different approaches to writing, but it must have been a learning curve to actually like co-write a novel with someone else.
And I think that's probably why it didn't occur to us for so long, because Collette had always had these brilliant like novel ideas that would be like, "Oh, you should write this." And we do that thing of being on holiday and sort of plotting out the ideas. So it's very obvious that you had great ideas and had lots of interesting material to use. But it didn't occur to us for years and years that actually we could do it together, and we could actually work together.
And I suppose,
or that it would work. And
actually, so I was made redundant when I was pregnant. And so any writing that I would ever have done would have been before or after work, and I hate mornings, and I could go to the pub in the evening because we didn't have a baby. So actually, after she was born and we didn't have a social life, and we'd finished watching all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones twice, we decided to sit down and start writing a novel. But I think it was kind of life stage dependent as well for us.
Well, also it was nice to have something to talk about that wasn't the baby, like, because we'd spend all day with her, and then you get into this stage of like, oh, should we now spend the whole evening cooing over pictures of her? And like, actually having something else to talk about was quite
useful, even if it was murder. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like it was almost like a bit of a lifeline for you guys, having this new kind of aspect to your life, which you did entirely together as a partnership.
It definitely allowed me to use my brain in ways that I wasn't able to otherwise at that point.
And working together on something was also really nice, in the sense that it wasn't like we were working on separate novels, so you'd sort of be like desperately juggling time or feeling like you were taking time away from someone. You know, it would, you know, it was kind of quite nice to have a collegiate shared goal that sort of, you know, because also you're like, oh God, I desperately need a nap, and you come out and your novel's 500 words longer. Yeah, it's really good.
I'm going to have a bath.
The dream.
Make my novel longer. Yeah.
I've had a plot idea in the bath. Can you make it happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think many authors would dream of such a thing. Just the novel just writes itself while you're not there.
Ideal.
Before we head over to the desert island, I wanted to ask, and prefacing this with, I imagine that there will be plenty more Ellery Lloyd novels to come, but are either of you interested in doing any kind of solo writing in the future as well, maybe to explore different genres and styles?
To break the band up.
Oh, not necessarily. I did
like
preface
the Sugar
with...
Babes, I'll just keep replacing you.
Wouldn't. It'd be like, it would be one of those things like Take That, where we might have solo careers of wildly differing success. Like,
you know, because we both still have other jobs. Not currently, because, you know, we're sort of prioritising Ellery Lloyd. Definitely, it's not a no.
Yeah, I mean, I do academic writing. People who've enjoyed Final Act of Juliette Willoughby may enjoy my forthcoming book about Victorian literary advice.
They may, yes, they may.
I'm not sure it's going to be a New York Times bestseller.
There's probably some crossover there somewhere. There's a very slim bit of Venn diagram crossover.
How would you find that difficult to deal with, Collette, if my academic book was...
No, I would be very, very surprised, but I wouldn't be traumatised.
Okay.
So I think maybe eventually, you know, who knows? We've talked about screenwriting. We've talked about sort of slight genre shifts. Maybe is there a kind of another pseudonym? We are focusing on the writing that we have in front of us as Ellery Lloyd at the minute, because we're still really enjoying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any genres that maybe one of you would likes, but the other one doesn't? Like maybe like a rom-com or like a fantasy or something that one of you would like to pursue, and the other one's like, I don't think that's for me.
I got really into romance because I taught a bit of romance on, because we do lots of genres on the novel writing course I teach at Greenwich. So we had a week on romance that everyone was dreading, but everyone loved them. They were great.
Well,
they were
Paul's
so
first
good.
2 books were kind of romantic comedies.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can't do that. I definitely couldn't do romance or no. I quite fancy horror. But not
horror romance.
Horror romance.
It's big, right? It's trending right now. Horror romance.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Right, there we go.
Get working.
Get Paul.
Nailed it. Perfect. Unfortunately, you're both here, so the novel won't start writing itself.
Yeah.
That is, well, maybe we'll get our daughter to do it.
Well, she's keen to come up and do a kids' book, isn't she?
She is. It would involve unicorns, so I'm not sure we could shoehorn that into a horror romance. But
I think that could work. Horror unicorns.
Oh,
yeah,
very dark.
Exactly, edgy.
That brings us to the desert island. So, one at a time, I guess. If you two were stranded on a desert island, which book do you hope that you would be stuck there with?
Do you know what? You must get this all the time. I'm going to have to say...
Welcome to the Working Week by Paul Vlitos.
Yeah, that's what I'll have.
I do get that all the time. How did you know?
That's what I'll have. Yeah, actually, I'm going to flip. Also, Paul's first novel.
Take my second novel, which you never finished. I found my second novel, Every Day's Like Sunday, with a bookmark like 3/4 of the way through, like 3 years into our marriage. So I would take that one. See how it ends.
Oh right, yes, yeah. Does it just sort of fizzle out, Paul?
Like, without you there to like put a murder in.
Yeah, exactly.
I should have told you there's a murder.
You should have done. There's a murder in the end. Yeah.
Not just about Felix. That's not a joke.
I'll take both of Paul's first novels.
Both our book choices. I mean, you do occasionally catch me.
But what I'll probably do is just look at Instagram instead. Is that allowed?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, good, thanks.
Oh, great. Now I'm just stuck on a desert island with both of my own books.
Yes.
Which I do occasionally, you know.
I know you do.
The shelf
Paul does. Okay, but we've got, obviously, like all writers, we've got shelves of our books, and Paul does fairly frequently take one of them down off the shelf and just chuckle to himself at a line.
Sometimes it's at one of your beds.
Yeah. Go on, Paul. What are you going to take?
No, we've got.
You've got it. He's got his own.
We've got them. There you go. Those are our two.
Okay, that is excellent choice, guys. Really, really
Thanks.
good stuff.
Desert Island is literally the only time you would read literary advice and British literary culture.
Yes, so we'll take that
which
as well.
I haven't finished yet. So I'm going to take a book and finish it.
Amazing. Well, I love that. I love that for both of you. Next up, I've got some questions about potential teething problems of co-writing, literary agents, and the Reese Witherspoon Book Club, but that's going to be in the extended episode exclusive to my amazing Patreon subscribers.
to alienate
to clarify
half your family and lots of readers. London, Scotland, the Literary Crime Festival in Stirling.
Yes.
Okay. And on that note, that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, guys. It's been so cool and interesting and fun chatting with you and hearing all about the new book and your kind of experiences with writing and publishing.
It was lovely to chat. Thank you.
And for anyone listening, the final act of Juliette Willoughby is out now. You can go and get it in all the usual places. And to keep up with what Paul and Collette are doing, you can follow them on Twitter at Ellery Lloyd, on Instagram at Ellery Lloyd_author, or on the website www.ellerylloyd.com. To support the podcast, like, follow, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and follow along on socials. Join the Patreon for extended episodes ad-free and a week early, and check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again to Paul and Collette, and thanks to everyone listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.